Hello girls, I hope you're staying safe at home. To continue with the digestive system, today we are going to start with bile. Bile is a yellowish green and watery fluid, and it is produced in the liver, and it is transported directly from the liver through the hepatic duct. Okay, the hepatic duct is joined by the cystic duct. Now the cystic duct comes from the gallbladder. Okay, so when the hepatic duct, which comes from the liver, and the cystic duct, which comes from the gallbladder, they join together, it forms a common bile duct. Now the bile, it comes either directly from the liver, okay, through the hepatic duct, or it will get temporarily stored in the gallbladder, and from the gallbladder, what carries it down? The cystic duct, and then the cystic duct and the hepatic duct, they join together to form the common bile duct. Now the color of the bile, that is yellowish green, is due to certain pigments, biliverdin and bilirubin, and it is produced by the breakdown of dead and worn out red blood cells. When red blood cells are destroyed in the liver, pigments, biliverdin and bilirubin is given out, and that gives the bile its yellowish green color. Okay, and bile also contains sodium bicarbonate, which helps in neutralizing the acid content of food which comes from the stomach. Remember, in the stomach, hydrochloric acid is there, so food becomes acidic. So when it moves down into the small intestine, what does bile contain? It contains sodium bicarbonate, so it neutralizes the acid content of the food and makes it alkaline. And when it becomes alkaline, then only the pancreatic and intestinal enzymes will act on it. The pancreatic and intestinal enzymes will not act on acidic food. So the acidic food coming from the stomach is turned into alkaline form by sodium bicarbonate, which is found in bile. Now bile salts reduce the surface tension of fats also. That is, fats, oily things, how they are like tightly, the molecules are tightly packed together. So there is surface tension. So that surface tension is broken down by the bile salts, and then it is broken down into tiny droplets. This is known as emulsification. So what is emulsification? It is the breaking down of fat into tiny droplets, and when it breaks down into tiny droplets, then the enzymes will get a greater surface area to act on. So the role of the bile is the acidic chyme coming from the stomach. Okay, bile contains sodium bicarbonate and it turns into alkaline chyme. So once it turns into alkaline chyme, the pancreatic and intestinal enzymes will be able to act on it, and then the fat is broken down by the bile salts into smaller particles, so that is known as emulsified fat. Okay, now next, moving on to the pancreatic juice. It is produced in a whitish gland which is known as pancreas, and it is found behind the stomach. The pancreatic duct opens into the duodenum by an aperture common to that of a bile duct. So there is a tiny opening. Okay, and it is common to the bile duct. Now the pancreatic juice contains three types of enzymes. First is amylopsin, also known as pancreatic amylase. It digests leftover starch. If there is any leftover starch which was not digested in the mouth or the stomach, it will turn into maltose. Okay, so what is the enzyme? Amylopsin. What is the food part it acts on? Starch. And what is the end product? Maltose. Okay, next is trypsin, which acts on remaining proteins and polypeptides to produce smaller peptides and amino acids. Remember, amino acid is the final product of proteins. Okay, so trypsin again is first secreted as inactive trypsinogen, and it is activated to trypsin by an enzyme which is known as enterokinase. So enterokinase, also known as enteropeptidase, turns inactive trypsinogen into trypsin. Okay, and trypsin acts on proteins and polypeptides to produce smaller peptides and amino acids. And remember, this enzyme enterokinase is secreted by the inner lining of the duodenum. The third enzyme is trypsin. It acts on emulsified fats to turn them into fatty acids and glycerol. That is the end product of fat. So the role of pancreatic enzymes in a nutshell is trypsinogen, which is inactive. It is turned into active trypsin by enterokinase, the enzyme which is produced by the inner lining of the duodenum. Okay, then the proteins and peptides are acted upon by enzyme trypsin and turns it into smaller peptides and amino acids, and amylopsin or pancreatic amylase acts on leftover starch and turns it into maltose, and then finally stepsin, which acts on emulsified fat and turns it into fatty acids and glycerol. Okay, now next, moving on to intestinal juice. Intestinal juice contains erypsin. Okay, it is a mixture of peptidases to convert remaining peptides into amino acids. So peptides, amino acids, peptides, it's a bigger form, and when it is broken down, it breaks down into amino acids, the last part of proteins which can be absorbed by the body. And intestinal juice also contains another enzyme, maltase. It digests maltose into glucose. It contains lactase enzyme, and it digests the food material lactose into glucose and galactose. And it also contains sucrase, or also known as invertase. It breaks up sucrose into glucose and fructose. And there are some little bit lipase which digests fat into fatty acids and glycerol. So intestinal juice has erypsin or peptidases which turns leftover peptides into amino acids, maltase which turns maltose into glucose, sucrase which turns sucrose into glucose and fructose, lactase which turns lactose or milk sugar into glucose and galactose, and finally some amount of lipase which turns emulsified fat into fatty acids and glycerol. So this is where the digestion of food ends, and now the food is ready to get absorbed in the blood. So the final products of food are mainly absorbed in the intestine itself. The amino acids and the simple sugars, that is glucose, fructose and galactose, have very small sized molecules which is absorbed through the thin epithelium of the villi, and then it reaches the blood capillaries to finally enter the blood circulation, and then it reaches the liver first through the hepatic portal vein. Now, you know, children, the end product of fat is fatty acids and glycerol. Okay, so this fatty acids and glycerol are absorbed into the lymph vessels or the lacteals. There in the villi at the center you had the lacteal. So this is a part of the lymphatic system. Now when we talk about a lymphatic system, we have the liquid part of blood together with white blood cells flowing in these channels which are known as lymph vessels. Actually what happens is the liquid part of blood together with some white blood cells leaks out from the blood capillaries and surrounds the cells, and it is from here that oxygen and these food material, digested food, is exchanged between the blood capillaries and the cells. Some of the liquid part of blood, again, it is reabsorbed by the capillaries, but most of it flows through the channels which forms the lymphatic system in our body, and ultimately from the lymphatic network what happens, again it goes back into the blood vessels. Okay, so the fatty acids and glycerol are absorbed into the lymph vessels or the lacteal, which forms a network throughout the body. Now the food passes very slowly through the intestine. It takes about 4 hours, and ultimately it enters the large intestine. Now the large intestine is about 1.5 meters long. So this is from where it enters. So you can see the large intestine, which is made up of three parts. First is known as the cecum, then colon, and then the rectum. Okay, now the cecum is a small, this, as soon as it enters, this part is known as the cecum. Okay, it is a small blind pouch situated at the junction of the small intestine. This is the small intestine. Junction means the small intestine is joining the large intestine. So from its blind end, so this is a blind end. Beyond that, there is nothing. But from the blind end, you can see appendix coming out from here. Okay, a narrow worm-shaped tube called vermiform appendix. Okay, so when inflamed, sometimes little bit of food comes in and it will start getting swollen up. When it gets swollen up, then it causes appendicitis. It has to be operated. Okay. And remember, vermiform appendix is a vestigial organ. Vestigial means it does not have any work now. It is just remains there. It does not have any function. It is functionless. Now next is the colon, is broader than the ileum and is little more than 1 meter long. It passes up the ascending colon you can see here. Okay, it is going up. Then it crosses to the left just below the stomach. From here, just below the stomach, you can see this is the stomach here. Okay, just below the stomach, it goes, passes like that. Okay, so that is known as the transverse colon, and then after that again it will descend down. That is known as the descending colon. Okay, so finally it goes and forms the rectum. So it is in the rectum, which is the last part of the large intestine, about 15 centimeter long, and ultimately it opens to the anus, to the outside. The anus has circular muscles here, okay, and sphincter muscles, and it keeps it closed except when passing bowels. And the function of the large intestine is to absorb only water. No digestion takes place here. No enzymes are secreted here. Okay, and what happens? Most of the water is absorbed, but very less digested food. Okay, most of the food that passes through the large intestine is undigested material. So after water is absorbed, the contents become semi-solid feces, which passes into the rectum, and it is stored in the rectum temporarily. So the expulsion of the undigested remains of the food from the alimentary canal is called defecation. So finally, what happens? The undigested food is thrown out from the anus. The feces normally is made up of 75% water, 25% solid matter, which is made up of about 30% dead bacteria, 2 to 3% proteins, 10 to 20% fat, and 30% roughage. Okay, and remember, the bad smell of feces is due to bacterial action. So the food is digested in the alimentary canal and it is absorbed by the blood. So what happens to the food that is absorbed by the blood? It gets assimilated in the body. Now what do you mean by assimilated? Assimilation is the conversion, converting the absorbed digested food into body material, that is making up different cells, okay, proteins in the body. The food digested and absorbed by the gut are transported in two ways: through hepatic portal system and through lymphatic system, either from the blood or through the lymphats was through the lymph, and other nutrients were through the hepatic portal system. Simple sugars, amino acids, vitamins, minerals are carried to the liver by the hepatic portal vein. The liver then converts excess glucose. If there is any excess sugar, okay, then it cannot flow in the blood. So what does the liver do? It converts it and stores it in the liver itself in the form of insoluble glycogen. Okay, it is temporarily stored in the liver, and whenever required, the glycogen is again reconverted back into glucose. So the process by which excess glucose is turned into insoluble glycogen so that it can be stored in the liver is known as glycogenesis. Okay, so I told you whenever required, the liver reconverts the glycogen back into glucose, and this process is known as glycogenolysis. Okay, and then this glucose goes back into the blood circulation. Glucose is required in the body, okay, as a source of energy in cellular respiration, because you know it is glucose which is broken down by the oxygen to give out carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Okay, and it is also used in the synthesis of certain compounds. Amino acids, they circulate in the body and they serve as building blocks of proteins, and you know proteins are required for growth. The amino acids, it cannot be stored, just like excess sugar was stored in the liver as glycogen. Remember, amino acids cannot be stored in the body, and any excess amino acids are taken to the liver and it is broken down there by a process which is known as deamination. Okay, in which the nitrogen containing amino group is removed and converted into urea, and urea, it goes to the kidneys for excretion, and the remaining part forms glucose which can be utilized. Now the fatty acids and glycerol absorbed by the gut are transported, you know, mainly through the lymphatic system, the lymph, in the lacteal. The thoracic duct of the lymphatic system, it empties into large veins carrying blood to the heart. Ultimately, from the lymphatic system, as I already told you, it empties it back into the large veins which carry blood to the heart. Some of the fat are used in the synthesis of certain compounds in the body cells, and any excess is deposited chiefly below the skin as subcutaneous fat or around visceral organs in smaller quantities. When we talk about visceral organs, we're talking about, you know, the heart, the liver, the kidneys. So fat is deposited around these visceral organs. Now, liver, remember, is the largest gland of the body. It weighs about 1.5 kg and it is reddish brown organ, and you will find it on the upper right side of the abdomen just below the diaphragm. Okay, children, with this we come to the end of the digestive system chapter. Now for your assignment this week, there is a table in your textbooks. I don't know the page number because I have a new edition in mine. It is page number 111. It is just on near the large intestine, which shows the summary of digestion in various parts of human alimentary canal. If you cannot find it, please let me know, which shows you the region, the secretion, what is secreted there, the enzymes produced in the secretion, and the nutrient it acts on, and the product of digestion. Please do that table and submit it on Saturday. Till then, children, stay safe. God bless you.